Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Behind the Desk. I'm your host Sally Barnes, bringing you the latest stories from across the world. Joining me tonight is Mike and Madeline from the newsroom, as well as Professor Hawkins from the Australian National University. Tonight we will be discussing the global, controversial issue of corporal punishment.
The three categories are domestic, schools and judicial. Domestic corporal punishment is defined as the use of physical force towards a child for the purpose of control or correction or as a disciplinary method.
Is it legal in Australia? And if so, why?
Yes, it is legal in Australia. The purpose of domestic corporal punishment is to correct and control, taking into account the age of the child, the method of punishment, the child's capacity for reasoning, and the harm caused to the child. Corporal punishment gives an immediate change in behavior, however not necessarily a long-term change.
What are the strengths and weaknesses of domestic corporal punishment?
This is a much debated issue in Australia and globally. It is quite common in Australians' homes as a preferred punishment method by parents. There are many weaknesses of corporal punishment, including corporal punishment leading to abuse. There is a fine line between the two. It also can cause psychological damage to the child in the future, including depression and anxiety. It is an extremely downgrading punishment by hurting the child physically but also embarrassing the child. An advantage on corporal punishment is the fact that only the wrongdoer is punished. For example, the parents do not need to spend time watching the child do extra house jobs or sit in the naughty corner. It is also a very quick punishment.
Madeline, what role does school corporal punishment play in Australia's legal system? School corporal punishment is still officially legal in some states in Australia. However, it is rarely exercised. The Northern Territory, Queensland and South Australia do not have legislation banning the use of corporal punishment in schools. Domestic corporal punishment and school corporal punishment are quite similar in the way that they are both disciplining the child to obtain control and correction. As with domestic corporal punishment, the strengths and weaknesses are quite similar. They are both extremely downgrading punishments.
Would you recommend bringing school corporal punishment back in Australian schools, making it legal?
It has been proven that schools corporal punishment change the child's behavior immediately, but not in the long run. For this reason I would not recommend schools corporal punishment a place in the ACT's legal system. Punishment a place in the ACT's legal system, as it does not rehabilitate but solely denounce. Professor Hawkins, could you give us a brief overview of judicial corporal punishment?
Judicial corporal punishment has been abolished in Australia since 1914. It plays no part in Australia's legal system. However, it is still a legal and exercised punishment internationally, especially in Asia and Africa.
Thank you for your time today. We now leave to the debate between Singapore Prime Minister Lee Loong and Australia's Director of Public Prosecutions, Robert Brunswick.
I am a strong believer in the effectiveness of corporal punishment, particularly by caning. I bent over a chair and was given 3 of the best with my trousers on. It did me more good than harm. Have never understood why Western countries are so against this punishment.
The purposes of a sanction is to punish, prevent, protect, rehabilitate, hold accountable, denounce and recognize. How does corporal punishment reflect this?
Singapore uses caning as the corporal punishment method, but it is always incorporated with a prison sentence.
Why does Singapore use caning as a punishment method?
According to Singapore's Bureau of Crime Statistics, Singapore now has one of the lowest crime rates in the world. I believe this is due to our corporal punishment method. Australia's recorded sexual assault crimes yearly is over double the amount in Singapore. This is because of the harsh punishments presented by Singapore government. Corporal punishment is effective.
Just to clarify, do you believe that corporal punishment meets the purposes of a sanction?
Corporal punishment punishes the offender. It prevents the convicted of re-offending because they are being physically hurt and do not want to be struck with the cane again. It however does not protect the community in such a sense, but Singapore aims to denounce the offender to deter other people from offending. Singapore punishments are not strong on rehabilitation methods, but more so to punish and hold the offender accountable.
I now meet with Robert Brunswick after the debate.
Pleasure to be here.
Do you believe that the aims of a sanction are being met, using corporal punishment?
Absolutely not. The reason that corporal punishment was abolished was because it was not effective of meeting the needs of a sanction. Corporal punishment does not deter offenders from re-offending, which is one of the 7 factors of the aims of having a sanction. Corporal punishment does not rehabilitate the offender. The offender is not held accountable either, as they have committed a crime against the community, but are still left within the community. For example, using corporal punishment, the offender would be caned or whipped or similar, but then be let back into the community, not being held accountable. Corporal punishment certainly denounces the offender, however for a punishment to be effective it should reflect all 7 purposes of a sanction.
Using an example, could you think of any reasons why corporal punishment is effective?
Singapore uses corporal punishment frequently to punish offenders. An advantage of using this punishment is the fact that it is a one-off punishment. Although it is incorporated with a prison sentence, it is often a shorter sentence, meaning it is saving money and time of the Singapore government. In saying this, I think that the disadvantages of corporal punishment outweigh the advantages.
Should corporal punishment have a place in the ACT's legal system?
No, to clarify, it does not meet the requirements of an effective sanction.
Thank you for your time today.
We will now be discussing domestic corporal punishment, using examples from Queensland where a man was charged with assault, but claims he was just punishing his child. A father in Queensland is facing assault charges when he allegedly struck his 14-year-old daughter with a bamboo stick numerous times. The 14-year-old girl was struck with a bamboo stick at least 13 times by her father in their Surfers Paradise home. Section 280 of the Queensland Criminal Code allows a parent, or person in place of a parent or a schoolmaster, to use reasonable force for the correction, discipline. The father argued that it was not abuse, that he was simply punishing his daughter for being defiant and disrespectful. He was found guilty of assault resulting in bodily harm by Maroochydore District Court. The prosecution argued, by the 5th strike with a stick it was classed as abuse, because the offender did not use reasonable force. In the ACT, a defense for corporal punishment leading to abuse is reasonable chastisement, which is a common law defense. However, in Queensland this defense is not practiced. Domestic corporal punishment is legal, it is still a part of Australia's legal system, but it does not meet the needs of an effective sanction. As with the case discussed, discipline was taken to a new level, leading to the abuse of a 14-year-old girl. This shows how ineffective corporal punishment is. Schools corporal punishment is a much debated issue in Australia. Tony Abbott voiced his opinion wanting corporal punishment back and practiced in schools. He says, as our teachers get gentler, our kids get more brutal, the strap will bring kids back in line. However, it has been proven by psychologists and UNICEF that schools corporal punishment has a negative effect on students. It lowers their self-esteem, it interferes with the learning process, it puts a negative view on school. It is possible for children to suffer serious injuries as a result. As discussed today, domestic, schools and judicial corporal punishment all have negative effects on society. They are downgrading and ineffective forms of sanctions. It is very unlikely that judicial corporal punishment will be brought back to Australia's legal system, as it does not meet all the requirements of an effective sanction, to punish, prevent, protect, rehabilitate, hold accountable, denounce and recognize. It does however denounce and punish the offender. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm your host Sally Barnes. I'll see you next week for another episode of Behind the Desk.